Dune is changing cinema, but not in the way that you may think. Dune 2 isn't perfect. It's not without its flaws, but I do think it might have revolutionized cinema and filmmaking in multiple ways, which we'll get into in a bit. What is perfect about Dune 2 though, and what makes so many people feel immersed in the world of Frank, are the visuals. The beauty of the world building and the ability to portray the vastness laid in front of us. The use of IMAX wide frame shots, for example, that completely cover the screen from top to bottom, give us that sense of grandeur and make the audience feel enveloped. In fact, the whole second movie was shot in IMAX, compared to only 40% of the first Dune being shot in IMAX. That makes a big difference. It's hard to not feel completely immersed when you're watching these shots in the massive screen of a cinema. Don't you dare watch this on your shitty 40-inch TV. The stunning visuals are thanks to Greg Fraiser. He won Best Cinematography for Dune 1 and is back for the second movie. I would even argue that he takes it up a notch in the second part of this franchise. The sweeping shots of the desert, the monumental scale and how they're able to capture that, not only throughout the movie, but especially at the end battle scenes, is incredible. I was completely engrossed in these scenes, and I would say we haven't seen scale done like this since The Lord of the Rings. What I find especially amazing is how they use nature in their shots. The use of natural environments was something Denis really insisted on, and you can tell when you watch the movie. He and Greg wanted to use the sand, the dust, the wind of the desert to create the inhospitable feeling of living on Arrakis. For Denis, it was just as much a character in the movie as anything else. Hence the filming in Abu Dhabi and Jordan. Not only that, but the use of light and color of sunsets and sunrises in particular, mind-blowing. One particular scene where it stands out is the fight between Paul and Feyd-Rautha. Am I the only person that can never remember that name, by the way? For the life of me, I can't remember Austin Butler's character's name. It slips me every time. Anyway, you can see the sunset light hitting Paul's face. The decision to film facing the sun and how it casts the shadows of the fighters in question. A beautiful decision that kind of forces you to feel how ominous and important the scene is. I mean, this dictates the Atreides versus Harkonnen rivalry. Now that's all fun and great, but the real force majeure, don't know if I'm using that right, the real force majeure in the visuals of this movie comes in one particular scene. One that had much more behind it than what you may think. It's of course the Gaiety Prime scene. And at first glance, this might just seem an ordinary black and white scene, but it's not. I'll tell you why in a second. First, we have to talk about the fact that this scene solidifies a trend in cinema as of late. The use of black and white in big blockbuster films. Oppenheimer led the charge, but we've had various stellar movies like The Lighthouse, Cold War, Roma, that were completely black and white. For context, only 3 fully black and white movies had won the Oscar for Best Picture since 1962, and all 3 of those were made post. This is clearly something that is taking a life of its own in cinema as of late. And I, for one, am all for this. Anything that can enhance the creativity and originality of movies in cinema, the better. And Dune Part 2 implementing black and white into its movie just solidifies that trend. But see, what makes the Harkonnen scene in Dune 2 stand out against most of these movies is that most black and white movies will shoot in color and then change it to black and white in post-production and editing. It's just easier and affords more flexibility. It makes sense, I totally get it. Denis, though, is an interesting dude, and he likes doing as much as possible in the moment of filming, rather than in post, which is understandable. So his idea was to completely remove the IR filter of the camera and add a filter in front of the lens to block all visible light, making it so that it would only film in infrared, which is nuts. The end result is essentially a super high resolution version of what a security cam would give you. It's funny because he actually had to warn execs that once he filmed this in black and white, there was no going back. Like, you couldn't put the color back in post-production. Like, that was what they were going to be showing in the movie. That's a pretty ballsy move, if I may say so myself. And what you get with that brilliant creative decision is a scene that perfectly depicts the Harkonnen world, like perfectly, to a T. A world cut off from nature, a world where the sun shines in infrared, a totalitarian and fascist society filled with created monsters. The infrared enhances that with how alien-like it makes people seem. It's so eerie, but perfect for what it's trying to depict. A cool detail I noticed as well is how the black and white fades in slowly. From inside the stands where the Baron is, it slowly fades in as the camera pans towards the outside. The gradual progression to black and white kind of removes the superficialness of simply, turning a scene into black and white for the effect. It's not just a scene, it's how the characters experience it, a part of the world, not just the lens through which we see it. And I think that's a really, really good choice by Denis and Greg. Now, all this talk of black and white is kind of ironic, because how the movie uses color for the rest of the movie is so pivotal in making us feel like we're on Arrakis. David Cole, who is the lead colorist for Dune, said that there's effectively no water on Arrakis, particularly in the atmosphere. So we didn't want any blue skies that can imply that there's moisture in the air. Which, if you watch the movie back, you can realize the skies aren't really blue. And to achieve this, Cole and his team made a custom LUT, a custom LUT, which is a fancy way of saying color filter. You don't have to worry about the technicality. And they made this color filter for the exteriors of Arrakis, which causes the contrast to increase while the colors are darker and more desaturated. Which, watch the movie back and pay attention to the colors in specific. David Cole did an insane job. An insane job. Like, look at these scenes. The eerie and powerful yellow taint on the world, the way he adjusted color throughout Arrakis, amazing. It seems like a whole color palette we're watching, but really he's only pulling from one section of it. And in the cinema, you don't realize why, but you can't help but feel awe when watching the visual feast in front of you. And that brings us to the second way Dune Part 2 is revolutionizing cinema. And it comes down to one word: grit. See, the recent pursuit of constant improvement in video quality has led to movies without character almost, that look too clean and perfect to be real. That makes it incredibly difficult to relate to as an audience. Tomorrow's Filmmakers actually made an excellent video about this trend in filmmaking recently, which I recommend you watch after this. There's a huge debate in cinema about digital versus film cameras. By its nature, film is less clean, something that we're used to seeing in classic, legendary movies. But the thing is, film can look like digital, and digital can look like film. Look at the difference between The Hobbit here and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Both shot on the same red cameras, known for their digital look, but they both look so starkly different. One looks real, while the other looks fake. And see, the thing is with Dune Part 2 is that Greg Fraiser has no interest in working on clean movies and prefers the gritty look of movies like The Batman and Dune. This grit and unpolished look in movies is a trend that The Batman has helped catapult, but Dune has now solidified. It's not about the camera, but rather the way it's shot. And Greg Fraiser shows that in Dune Part 2. He's the mastermind that has helped bring back grit and authenticity to blockbusters, and I could not be more excited about that. I'm not gonna lie. Anyway guys, that's all from me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I always respond to comments, and I'll be pinning the best one. See you guys in the next one.